All right. We are back here at Song of the Day, coming to you from the Rock Cave. I'm your host, Mark Pierce. It is Saturday, a rainy Saturday here in New England. Where is that snow? Bring me the snow. What are we talking about today? Well, in the news yesterday, we hear that Michael Nesmith of the Monkees passed away at age 78. So let's talk about the Monkees. I think I did do one show on them in season one, but it's a good time to loop back around. First, a little bit about him. Born in Houston and grew up in the Dallas area, and then starts getting into music and eventually moves to LA. Fun fact, his mother, at the age of when he was 13 years old, was working as an executive assistant, and she invented liquid paper. And she ended up selling it to Gillette in 1979 for $48 million. How about that? I'm sure that was listed as something interesting if you were reading his stories in the news in the last day or so. But that was news to me. Anyway, he was early on. He was in the Air Force. He was a mechanic. Again, when he got out of there, he went to college. Ended up in L.A. He's working at the Troubadour when he enters an ad for actors and singers to be on a TV show. 437 applicants. He was very casual. He showed up in his beanie stocking cap that would be his signature look. And obviously they picked all of those characters for their personalities or the way that they looked. How about the Monkees? If you're a certain age, like myself, you grew up watching the reruns of the Monkees. I watched them on either Channel 56 out of Boston, growing up in New Hampshire, or maybe it was Channel 38, which was also out of Boston, I think. But that's where we would, in the 70s, that's what you did. You latchkey kids raised by a single parent, you just watched TV, right? And after school. And that's when we saw all those glorious shows. Emergency, Adam 12, Rockford Files, Brady Bunch. What else was there? Barney Miller. Remember Barney Miller? Fantasy Island reruns, I think, were at the time. Maybe they weren't reruns then. But anyway, those were all those shows that we would watch. And then the Monkees, we'd watch the Monkees. Now we watched those shows over and over again, and that was something different because they had music in them and a little bit of a music video in the middle of them, and it was funny. If you go back and watch the show now, it's just really not much about anything, and the canned laughter is just worth it just for that alone. But most of these guys were sort of musicians or not really musicians. Michael Nesmith was really the only one that they said was an accomplished musician, but he says otherwise. But the story of the Monkees is just crazy because they put these guys together, and then when they go to pick instruments, they're like, well, who's going to be the drummer on the show? And they were like, oh, well, Davy Jones he knows how to play the drums. And they're like, no, he's too short to be behind a drum kit. And look at that face. Like, you got to put him up towards the front. So they basically picked the instruments based on the characters, and anyway, it was just so the craziness that is around that show when you read about it. It's just amazing that it ever happened because they were just put together to try to fool around and try to make it look like they were playing music, but the next thing you know, they had in the studio they had actual musicians helping them out, lots of help, and then Don Kirshner puts out their debut record before the show comes out, and it's just listed as the Monkees as a band without any credit to anyone else that helped with the record. And the band was just crazy, saying, this is insane, like, you can't do this, you got to give credit to people who actually did this. But nope. And then sure enough, they had a number one hit on their hands before the show even came out, and their album stayed at number one for 13 weeks in 1966, and it was on the charts for like 76 weeks. So then they were like, well, you guys got to start touring. And they were like, what are you even talking about? We're not even a band. And they didn't really even rehearse or anything. They played their first show in, was it December 66 in Hawaii. And then people were just going so crazy that it didn't matter whether they could or couldn't play, but eventually they figured out how to play. But the lineup that you see on the TV show is not the one that they would have preferred to do live shows with based on their skills. All right. What else we got? He was an accomplished songwriter, and he spent the rest of his life doing a lot of writing. And of course, there were those reunions of the Monkees and partial reunions and fighting, and there was all kinds of stuff, all for decades to come after that. But they are an important part of our musical life growing up. What are your favorite Monkees songs? We got "Daydream," "Believer," "Last Train to Clarksville." That was their first single. Awesome song, one of my favorites. "Stepping Stone," also one of my favorites. The Monkees theme, of course. "I'm a Believer." "Pleasant Valley Sunday." And then again, one of my all-time favorites was "She." That's probably up there for me. I don't know if you know that song, "She," but that's a really good one as they zip around in their monkey mobile and go on with their show. But you get to see these songs in the middle of it, and that's how you became enamored with them and those songs. So those are some real good ones there. And we had already mentioned earlier this week that Frank Zappa was on their show, and he was playing the role of Michael Nesmith, and when Michael Nesmith was playing the role of Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa ends up smashing a car to one of his songs on there or something like that. But anyway, what are we going to do with Song of the Day? I mean, for me, it's "Last Train to Clarksville." That's a super good one right there. She is right up there, but that'll be your Song of the Day, and I want to hear your Monkees stories below. Tell me your stories about the TV show. And MTV brought it back in 1986. Did a marathon, and it took off all over again. The album came out, reissued, went to #1, and there was Monkey Mania all over again. So listen to the Monkees today, whatever you're doing, as usual. Catch you on the flip side.